everyone, thank you for watching Edupedia World videos. So in this video, we'll learn about the contents of a transport directory. This is the part 9 video of the change and transport system. Okay, so far like so many times we have come across this word transport directory. Okay, our understanding is that they are for the transport to take place. Okay, so we have some important configuration files as well as every change request which is created in the SAP system has some files. So the transport directory is the place where all the files are stored at the OS level. Okay, now the global transport directory and all the necessary subdirectories are created during the installation of an R3 system. So initially when you install your R3 system, so that time when you configure your change and transport system, okay, the transport organizer, the transport management system, so this directory you will be prompted to enter the location of this global transport directory. And the other thing is systems which share the common transport directory are called as a transport group. Okay, so in a domain we can have one, or we should have at least one transport directory, and we can have one or more transport directories. So this transport directory is created when the system is installed. Okay, so when systems share a common transport directory, okay, so if it's on Windows, that drive is made available to all the systems, or if it's in a Unix or AIX, okay, in that case that particular file system is that is shared across all the hosts. Now the subdirectories required in the common transport directory include, first one is bin. It contains the configuration files for TP. Okay, so we have the TP underscore the domain name .plf, the profile name, the transport profile. Okay, so in the last videos we have learned about this transport profile also. So it contains all the specifications of the transport, the systems or the system which is using that transport directory. Okay, so every transport directory has the important configuration file, that is the transport profile, that stands for TP underscore domain name .pfl, where domain name is the name of the domain controller in the transport domain. Okay, so the SID, SAP SID of the domain controller, and the TMS, that is the domain.crg. Okay, so these two are the important configuration files. Now the data, so the data which is exported. Okay, transport is nothing but if you make any change to the object, okay, so that particular change is exported to the OS level in the form of a file, and again whatever content is there in the file, it's imported into another system. So that's how we are doing the transport, by export and import. Okay, so you have a data directory where the data is stored. Okay, whenever we say like a change request is created, the corresponding files are stored at the OS level. So it's not, so that data is stored in this data subdirectory. Then old data, so it has the old exported data which can be archived or deleted. Okay, so generally like for the transports for the last 3 months or for the last 6 months are kept in the data directory, and the others are moved to old data. Okay, so depending upon your business process you can archive them or delete them. Generally they are archived for some period and later after some years they are deleted. Now log, the transport log, the trace files and the statistics. So this whole transport process, okay, we can trace it. Okay, and similarly a log file is also created. So the log directory contains all this information. Then the ACT log, the action logs for all tasks and requests. Then the buffer, the transport buffer for each system indicating which transports are to be imported. Okay, so when you open your import queue, you see a list of transports which are waiting to be imported or which have already been imported or whatever it is. Okay, so in that list we have some transports which are waiting to be imported. Okay, so those transport, all those transports are placed in the buffer. It's known as the transport buffer. Now the core files, the command or change request information files that include information on the transport type, the object classes, required import steps, and post-processing exit codes. Now that's it. Now the actual data which is moved from one system to another, is stored in a file which is known as the data file, and that is seen in this data directory. Now we have another set of files for each change request known as the control files, or in short the core files. Okay, so these have the information like the transport type, the object classes, the required import steps, and the post-processing exit codes. So how now if a transport gets imported, like are there any extra steps to be processed, or this core file contains all the important information, the control information for that particular transport request. Okay, so every transport has change request has two files when it's released. Okay, a data file, the core file. Okay, so the data files are stored in the data directory and the core files are stored in this core files subdirectory. And the SAP names information pertaining to the transport request for each SAP user. Then EPS, download directory for advanced corrections and support packs. So this EPS is also a subdirectory in this transport directory. So whenever we upgrade our SAP system, whenever we apply patches, so those we generally put them in this EPS folder, and the temporary data and the log files. Okay, we have temp folder as well. So these are all the subdirectories of a transport directory. Okay, this transport directory it can be shared across several systems, or it can be restricted only to one system. Okay, so the important ones are the bin, the data, the core files. We have the transport buffer. Okay, it doesn't mean the others are not important, but when we talk about transport requests, whenever we need to investigate something, okay, so you can check the data files, the core files, the logs, okay, and the configuration files. Okay, so these are generally very useful to troubleshoot anything. Okay, now in the transport process, one of the tasks is to release a change request and thereby export all the associated objects from the database of the development system DEV to the files in the common transport directory at the operating system level. That's what, right? So when we release a change request, the files are automatically created at the OS level in this transport directory. So that's why while installation, if you give the path of this transport directory, the data file, core file, all the subdirectories, then so next time when the system is running, a change request is released. So initially you have configured all this, right? Now the system will look where is my transport directory, and it will create the respective data files and core files there. For each request release, the data is exported to the data file in the subdirectory data, and the control file is written to the subdirectory core file. Okay, so the data file is written to the subdirectory data, and the control file is written to the subdirectory core file. So during the transport, the TP will create a data file and a core file. So data file, it has the data, and core file, it has the attributes of the data file. Okay, so it has the control information. Okay, so this transport is released from this system, it has to go into that system. What is the client? Okay, what is this transport type? Okay, what all this information, like if it requires any post processing after import into the target system. So all these important attributes this core file has. So by mistake, if we delete any of the data file or the core file, okay, then you will have to release the request again. Okay, so say like generally what happens, the development system, the quality system, they have a common transport directory, and the production system has a different, it's generally not included in this transport group. It is kept as a different transport group, so it has its own transport directory. So while importing into the production system, see, like if any one of the file is corrupted or something, you're facing some problem, still you will have a chance to get the data file in the co-file which are in the transport directory of the development system. So that is one of the reason, like for a backup purpose also, generally in real-time scenarios, the transport directory of the production system is kept separately. Okay, the dev, the QA, they share one transport directories. Generally, like the development systems will have one transport directory, the QA systems will have one transport directory, and the production systems in your business will have one transport directory. So in case if the file is corrupted, while because we are more concerned about our production system, okay, so in case of any one of we are facing issues with any of the files while importing into production system, still we can get the backup from the development system. Okay, say like somebody has unexpectedly deleted the file in the development system without, it's imported into the QA or production, then you will have to release the request, create the release it again. Okay, so because already a request is there, okay, still you have to create a new request with that old change request. Okay, otherwise if a developer has just done some changes, he released the change request in the development box, the files are created in the transport directory. Okay, somebody by mistake or accidentally has deleted these files, this data file or co-file or both of them, then if they don't have a backup elsewhere in the QA or production, still it didn't move further, then you have to release the request, create a new change request and release it again. Okay, so that's why for a transport to be imported into the SAP system, we need to have the corresponding data file and the co-file in the transport directory. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So unless the import completely happens into the production system where the change is moved, okay, we see the new program or we see the new table structure, whatever is the change. Okay, so before that, if the files are deleted, you can get a backup from the other transport directories. If they don't exist in the other transport directories, then the request has to be created again and released. Now, the co-files directory holds the command files for all the change requests. These files are like a command or a control file used to import the data files. Okay, so the co-files, they trigger the import, they help to facilitate the import of this data. The common directory for the CTS is USR SAP trans. Okay, so in an AIX Unix, this is the file system where the transport directory is generally configured. It stands as /usr/sap/trans. After a change request is released from the source system, the data is exported immediately to the file system of the operating system. That's why once the request is released, it's immediately exported to the operating system as a file. The SAP transport utility DB uses the co-file to transport a data file. So the USR SAP trans data, it holds the actual data of the object which is released, and the other subdirectory, the /USR SAP trans /co-files, it has the control information. Okay, so an example of a co-file and a data file are, so KA, this is the number .dav and RA. So the co-files, they start with K and the data files start with R. Okay, and a number. Now this extension dev means the data file was released from the development or the development system. Okay, so the object, the data file has that particular object which is changed in this DAV system. The SID is DAV, which is the development system's SID. Okay, so this is where in that particular system the change was made and it's released. So the corresponding files are created in this way. The co-file starts with K, the data file starts with R, followed by a number dot the SID of the source system where the change request was released. Now if you want to import this request, now this is the request name. Earlier also we have seen the request name, it starts with the SID of the development system where it's released. Okay, so DAV, the request, K9, whatever it is. If you want to import this particular request in other system, any other system, then you have to copy the co-file and the data file to the target system co-file and data file folder and import the request in the target system using htms_import tcode. That's what. Now initially you configure the transport route, so automatically, so once the import is done into the development box, okay, the request, SAP will get to know like what is my target system after development. Okay, so in your transport route it's the QA, so it will go and sit in the QA. Okay, and if they share a common transport directory, then it's visible that a transport directory is accessible to the QA system also. However, if they don't share a common transport directory, then you have to copy these files, the co-files and the data files. Okay, you have to copy them, place in the target system's co-file and the data file directories, and then you run this htms_import in the target system. Okay, so first you have to add the request in the import queue, so that you'll do by extras_other request add. Okay, so if the transport route is created, then as per the transport route, once it's exported from the development, it automatically goes to QA. Once it successfully gets imported into QA, it reflects in the development import queue. Okay, but if it's any other path which you are following, then you have to copy these data file and the co-file to the target system. Okay, and place them in the respective subdirectories at the OS level. Then you add the request to the import queue. Okay, and then you import it. Okay, so this is the procedure. That's why for any change request, this files, the data file which starts with R and the co-file which starts with K, both have a extension .sap SID, that is the SID of the SAP system where the change request was released. Okay, so say like if you have so many files, okay, in the transport directory, and you have different development boxes, you can differentiate using this extension the SID which is there for the co-file and the data file. You can differentiate that, oh, these files belong to this system, these files belong to this system. Okay, say like we have a system GBA and one more system GBS as two development systems. So all the files having extension .gba, they belong to the GBA system, and all the co-files and the data files having the extension .gbs, they belong to this GBS system. Okay, and you differentiate a co-file and a data file. Co-file starts with K, the data file starts with R. Okay, and similarly the transport request also, the first three letters are the SID where it's created. Okay, so all the transport requests released from GBA system are GBA something, and all the transport requests which are released from the GBS system are GBS something. Okay, so that's how you can differentiate between the transport requests which belong to various development boxes or that particular landscape. Now, so and every transport request has two important files, the data file and the co-file. So these are placed in the corresponding data file and the co-file directories in the transport directory. Okay, and the other thing which we have seen in this video is what are the subdirectories in this global transport directory, like bin, data, old data, log, act log, buffer, the co-files, okay, SAP names, EPS and temp. Okay, so these are all the subdirectories in the global transport directory. Okay, so this is about the transport directory contents and the files which a change request carry, that is the two files, the data file and the co-file. Okay, so for transport to move from one system to another, you have to either copy manually or using some script the data files in the, if the two systems don't share a common transport directory, then you have to put them in the target transport directory for the import to happen. Okay, so this is about the transport directory. Now In the next video, okay, we'll just learn about the how the transport request is named in SAP. Okay, the change request naming convention we'll learn in the next video. Okay, thank you, bye.